Promoting someone into leadership is never simple. Done right, it builds trust and strengthens the team. Done wrong, it creates resentment and drama that can take a really long time to resolve. Today, I'm sharing how to avoid the pitfalls by using an unusual interview technique that will reveal who's really ready to lead their peers. Welcome to Drama Free Teams, the show for leaders who care deeply and want their teams to thrive without the drama. I'm your host, Dr. Annie Campanile. Let's shift how you lead so you can stop dreading conflict and start driving results. One of the trickiest moments for any hiring manager is to promote a strong performer into a leadership role, especially when that person is now going to be managing their former peers. If you work in healthcare or another industry where it can be really difficult to find enough candidates to fill those leadership roles, you might find yourself with only internal candidates to interview. This can be a good problem to have because promoting from within has a lot of benefits, but it also can come with some risks for drama, especially if the team of peers expects their new leader to be their friend and to not hold strong boundaries or to let them get away with something that maybe they've been getting away with for a long time. Most interviews focus on technical skills or past performance, which I fully support. But what's often missing is a chance to see how the candidate will actually show up as a leader in front of their former peers. This is really important because the interpersonal dynamics are what will fuel this person's success or derail it, not their technical skills. And so often people are promoted because they do their current job really well. And usually leadership requires a whole different set of skills. I coached a leader, let's call Linda, who was faced with a bit of a conundrum. She had a supervisor role that had been open for several months, and it was becoming clear to her that the team was starting to kind of fall apart without having a leader at their side. She was helping as she could, but since she has several departments that roll up to her, she could only visit that team periodically, round on them, and check in once in a while. But that's very different from having a supervisor right there that you can ask questions to or that could give them support in the moment. None of the external candidates who had applied for this role had met the minimum requirements that she had set, but she did have 3 strong internal candidates, and it was important to her to help people grow in their careers. So she was glad to have 3 internal candidates, but she was a little bit worried because this team historically had been very emotionally reactive to any change. Even if they had been invited to contribute, they hadn't actually chimed in. And so when a change was introduced, there was a lot of resistance because they would very quickly, sometimes before even understanding the change, they would say why it wouldn't work or they would just ignore it. So she didn't want that to happen with promoting a peer to a leader. She didn't want that peer to struggle. And also she didn't want the team to make an assumption that having a peer get promoted would mean nothing would change. So Linda, in a coaching session one day, asked me how she could select the internal candidate that had the best chance of leading this team and guiding them through future changes. She knew there was one particular change that was going to happen within a couple of months. So she wanted to select somebody who would have the best chance of leading that team through change. But none of these candidates had ever been leaders before. So she couldn't just ask a behavioral question like, tell me about a time when you guided a team through change. They wouldn't have been able to answer that. So I told her about an unusual interview technique that I have found over and over again to be one of the best ways to prepare a team for change and to help a peer who's interviewing for a leadership role understand that they actually will have to lead people through change. So both sides get a bit of a reality check of, hey, these work process changes or this organizational change is coming without putting the candidate on alarm or panic mode because they don't have the experience. That's okay. Give them a case study and have them present in front of their peers. A peer to leader interview presentation has many goals, but its number one purpose is to reveal how each candidate would eventually lead their peers. It also levels the playing field a bit and gives the team confidence in your choice and in your eventual selection of the new leader. I like to think of this as getting a first glimpse of leadership in action for each of these employees who would like to be a former peer and move into a leadership role. Now, this can be very daunting, especially for someone who has never been a leader before. That means it's an opportunity for you to take some care in preparing the candidates. We aren't trying to set them up to be under a spotlight and see if they'll panic or not. You want to understand how they think about this change. So in a moment, I'll guide you through the 3 steps of that process. I've also created a free peer-to-leader interview guide that you can download and use to guide yourself, the candidate, and the evaluation process so you don't have to create it on your own. There's a link in today's show notes to that guide for you. So here are my 3 steps to help you promote from within and prepare your team for change. Step 1 is to choose the change that you want the presentation to focus on. Make sure this change is real, but also simple. Here's a question you can ask yourself to identify the change that you want to focus on. What is one concrete change that I will expect the new leader to implement in their first 90 days? That's the change scenario you'll give to every candidate. Using the same scenario for each candidate will ensure fairness, consistency, and meaningful evaluation because you'll be able to compare each presentation against the same criteria. If, like Linda, you are working with a team who has traditionally been really resistant to changes or resentful of leaders who have introduced those changes, and you expect the team to strongly resist a particular change that's coming, then I recommend you choose that change, even if it's not going to happen in the first 90 days. Choosing a change that you expect the team to strongly react to will weed out candidates who might be too fearful of their team being unhappy with them. And it will send a clear message to the team that this particular change is going to happen. Also, you might be pleasantly surprised by a candidate's perspective about the change. Now, it's really important to give each candidate preparation time and advance notice of this presentation. Again, you're not wanting to set them up to be surprised. You want to see what kind of leadership presence can they bring when they present their case study in front of their peers. To help each candidate prepare to deliver their presentation, I recommend giving them a 3-step structure. And this is built into the peer-to-leader interview guide that I mentioned earlier. There's a link in today's show notes to that guide for you. So step 1, choose the change you want the candidates to focus on. Step 2, give each candidate the same guidance to help them prepare in advance. And step 3 is to evaluate each candidate the same way. When I described those 3 steps to Linda, at first she was a little hesitant because she felt like it was going to take a lot of time. But then we talked about how much time she already had spent searching for the right candidate and how much time of hers was currently being expended trying to support this team when they didn't have a supervisor in place. Spending a few more hours or even days on the interview process with internal candidates can help you save yourself months of time and energy that would be wasted if you skipped this step and hired someone who wasn't ready to move into that leadership role and grow through the tension that occurs when you're now leading your former peers. Speaking of that tension, in the next episode, I'm going to be talking to those new leaders. So if you've got new leaders or people who were promoted from peer to leader, be sure to share the next episode with them because we'll tackle one of the hardest challenges for new leaders, and that is the internal tug-of-war between wanting to be liked by former coworkers and needing to hold boundaries as a leader. Until then, I'm Dr. Annie Campanile, reminding you that thriving in leadership is possible and you don't have to do it alone. See you next time.